The night before my wedding, I accidentally overheard my fiancé's secret. So here's what I did. There are moments in life that change everything. Moments where, in the span of a few minutes, everything you believed in shatters like glass. I never thought my wedding eve would be one of those moments. I was supposed to get married last week. The dress was ready. The venue was booked. The guests had RSVP'd. My fiancé and I had been planning this for months. My parents were thrilled, my friends were excited, and for a while, I let myself believe in the fairy tale. But fairy tales aren't real. And I learned that the hard way. I was engaged to my boyfriend of 3 years and we had twin boys together, a surprise we hadn't planned for. When I found out I was pregnant, he had tried to convince me to terminate, saying we weren't ready, that this would ruin our lives. But I knew what I wanted. I was ready to be a mother, and I made it clear that he had a choice, stay or leave. I didn't ask for child support. I didn't demand anything from him. I simply told him I was keeping my babies, with or without him. Only then did he come around. During my pregnancy, he was supportive and attentive. After our sons were born, he stepped up, a good father and involved partner. When he proposed 6 months later, I said yes, believing that the past no longer mattered. That he had changed. Looking back, I wish I had questioned that more. Because the man I thought I knew didn't exist. The night before the wedding, tradition dictated that we stay apart. He was at his parents' house while I remained in ours, tucking our boys into bed, feeling the giddy nervousness that comes before a big life event. He called me around 10, his voice warm, telling me how much he loved me, how excited he was to finally call me his wife. It made me emotional. We had been through so much together. The ups and downs, the unexpected pregnancy, the stress of raising twins. And yet, here we were. I told him I loved him too. We said our goodbyes, and I waited for him to hang up. But he didn't. At first, I thought it was an accident. He had a habit of not pressing the end button properly. I almost ended the call myself. Then I heard a voice. His father. Were you just talking to her? His tone was neutral, but my fiancé's reply was not. Yeah, he said. His voice was different. Tired. Defeated. My stomach twisted. Something felt off. His father continued. Do you still feel the same way you did 2 days ago? My fiancé's answer changed everything. Yeah, he said. Flat. Empty. His mother chimed in then, her tone brisk, firm. It doesn't matter how you feel. You need to go through with this wedding. My hands tightened around the phone. What was I listening to? My fiancé, the man who had just told me he loved me, the father of my children, was being forced into this marriage? He didn't want this? He didn't want me? I held my breath, listening as he pushed back. I'll do whatever I want. You can't push me around. His father didn't flinch. We can't force you to marry someone you don't love. But we can cut you out of our will. The choice is yours. My heart stopped. That was why he had proposed. Not because he loved me. Not because he wanted to build a future with me. Because if he didn't, he would lose his inheritance. My ears rang as his mother spoke again. You have children now. You need to be responsible. It's bad enough that you had kids before marriage. This wedding is the only way to fix things. His father agreed. If you were old enough to make children, you're old enough to be a husband. I heard my fiancé exhale sharply, frustration leaking into his voice. This isn't fair. None of you care if I'm ready. Not her. Not you. Everyone just expects me to go along with this. I sat frozen, absorbing every word. He thought I had trapped him. That I didn't care about his feelings. That I was forcing him into something he never wanted. The love, the affection, the life we had built, it was all a lie. A door slammed. Footsteps stomped away. Then his parents kept talking. His mother sighed. Irresponsible as ever. His father scoffed. Maybe he'll come to his senses before tomorrow. That was when I finally hung up. My hands were shaking. My entire body felt cold. At that moment, one thing was clear. I wasn't getting married tomorrow. I sat in silence for what felt like hours. The room around me was the same, but everything had changed. The wedding dress was still hanging on the door, the veil draped over the chair. My bouquet sat on the counter ready to be picked up in the morning. But I was no longer the woman who had placed those things there with excitement. Because now I knew the truth. My fiancé didn't want to marry me. He had never wanted any of this. And worst of all, he saw me as the problem. The reality of it all settled in slowly like a creeping chill. The memories of the last 3 years replayed in my head, now coated in doubt. Had any of it been real? The nights he stayed up rocking our boys back to sleep. The way he kissed my forehead when he thought I was asleep. The inside jokes, the whispered, I love yous. The plans for our future. Had he meant any of it? Or had he just been convincing himself this was what he wanted? It didn't matter anymore. I wasn't going to beg for love that wasn't real. And I sure as hell wasn't going to marry a man who saw me as a burden. I picked up my phone and stared at our last message exchange. Just an hour ago he had told me he loved me, that he was excited to marry me, that I was the best thing that had ever happened to him. But I had heard the truth. His words were just a script, something he had trained himself to say because it was expected, because it was easier than admitting that deep down, he resented every second of it. My jaw was clenched. No, he wasn't going to get away with this. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch, staring at the engagement ring on my finger, waiting for the sting of heartbreak to come. But it didn't. Instead, I felt a quiet rage settling in, a slow-burning realization that I had been living in a fantasy someone else had written for me. And tomorrow, I was going to tear that fantasy apart. By sunrise, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to call him and demand answers. I was going to let him destroy himself. I grabbed my phone and started typing. A message to every guest. A message to his family. And finally, a message to him. Good morning. There won't be a wedding today. You don't love me, and I'm not going to marry someone who sees me as a mistake. I'll be packing up my things today. Don't bother coming home. I hit send and turned off my phone. No explanations. No second chances. No dramatic arguments. I was done. I packed in silence. Every item I put in a box felt like undoing a lie. The framed photos of us? Into storage. The gifts he had given me over the years? Shoved into a bag, meaningless now. The life we had built together? Dismantled piece by piece. And I did it all without shedding a single tear. Because I wasn't losing anything. He was. Around noon, the messages started pouring in. My family, my friends, people asked what had happened, if I was okay, if I needed anything. But I ignored them. I didn't want to explain, didn't want to hear their sympathy. Because this wasn't a tragedy. This was freedom. The only message I read was from his mother. It was short. You're making a mistake. I laughed. Because for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't. By the time my fiancé finally read my message, I was already halfway done packing. I had expected an immediate response. A flood of calls, desperate explanations, maybe even an attempt to convince me I was wrong. Instead, silence. I imagined him staring at his screen, rereading my words over and over, trying to process the fact that I had just walked away without a fight. Because that's what he had expected, a fight. Tears. Screaming. A last-ditch effort to hold on to something he had already thrown away. But I wasn't giving him the satisfaction. An hour later, the silence broke. My phone lit up with a single message from him. Let's talk. That was it. Not I'm sorry. Not I can explain. Just a lazy, detached command. Like I owed him a conversation. Like I hadn't already heard everything I needed to know. I didn't reply. I just kept packing. By noon, my mother showed up. She had called multiple times that morning. And when I didn't answer, she must have known something was wrong. She didn't ask questions. She took one look at my half-packed bags, exhaled sharply, and nodded. Good. Let's get this over with. She helped me pack up the last of my things while I explained what had happened. She didn't look surprised. That hurt more than I expected. I never liked him, she admitted as she taped up a box. But I kept my mouth shut because you seemed happy. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I had been happy. At least I thought I had been. But maybe I had just been convincing myself. At some point my phone buzzed again. Another message. This time from his mother. This is an overreaction. He was just venting. You need to be an adult and fix this. I laughed under my breath. Fix it? The only thing that needed fixing was my decision to ever trust her son in the first place. I turned my phone off. I wasn't interested in hearing her excuses for him. By mid-afternoon, I had everything loaded up in my mother's car. I had no plans to stay in this house another night. It didn't belong to me anymore. Nothing here did. Not the bed I once shared with a man who had lied to me. Not the walls that had heard his voice telling someone else how much he resented me. Not the space that had once felt like home. but now felt like a graveyard of broken promises. I took one last look around. Then, without hesitation, I left. And I didn't look back. That night, I stayed at my parents' house. I barely spoke, didn't cry, didn't let myself feel anything except the steady, growing relief of knowing I had escaped a lifetime of being unwanted. Because that's what this wedding had been. Not a celebration. Not a future built on love. Just a contract he had been pressured into signing. And I wasn't about to spend the rest of my life as someone's reluctant obligation. The next day, the messages from him became angrier. He had realized I wasn't just taking space. I was gone. So that's it? You're just walking away. I never said I didn't love you. You're making a mistake. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. But the real storm came when the guests started arriving. Because of the wedding? Was still scheduled for that evening. Hundreds of people. A venue. A reception. And no bride. He was going to have to stand there and explain why. And that? It was a consequence he fully deserved. The wedding was supposed to start at 5 p.m. By 3 p.m., guests were already arriving at the venue. Family. Friends. People who had flown in from other states, dressed in their best, expecting to celebrate a marriage that no longer existed. And the only person who could explain why? It was my ex. I didn't need to be there to know exactly how it went down. The moment people arrived, they would have noticed something was off. No bride. No bridal party. Just a nervous-looking groom, his frantic mother, and a father who was probably fuming that his son had managed to ruin everything. I imagined the whispers starting. The questions. The uneasy glances at the clock. Then, finally, someone demanding an explanation. And my ex? He had no choice but to tell them the truth. That I had left. That there was no wedding. That he had been dumped the morning of the biggest day of his life. Right in front of everyone who had ever doubted him. I got a message from a friend who had attended. You left him standing there? Damn. I could picture it in my head. Him standing in front of a crowd of confused and judgmental faces, trying to explain why his bride had vanished. His mother seething through the blame in every direction except where it belonged. His father humiliated, muttering about how irresponsible his son was. And the guests? Most of them are probably just there for the drama at that point. Another message came in. His mom is telling everyone you freaked out and ran away. But people are talking. Did someone say you left him a message before you left? What happened? I almost laughed. Of course, she was trying to control the narrative. Of course, she was telling people I was the problem. But what about lies? They don't hold up under pressure. Especially when the truth is already out there. I didn't need to respond. By now, people would start asking questions. Digging deeper. I wondered why a woman would walk away from her wedding day without a single word. Someone, probably one of his groomsmen, would eventually mention that he had been acting weird for weeks. He had complained about feeling trapped. That this whole thing had never been his choice. And the moment someone said it out loud, the cracks would start to show. By 6 p.m., my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Some messages were from my side of the family, people checking in, offering support, telling me I had done the right thing. Others were from his side. Angry texts. Accusations. His mother demanded I stop embarrassing them and fix this. His father asked me if I understood the damage I had caused. And my ex? He tried calling. Again. And again. And again. Finally, I blocked his number. I wasn't interested in fixing anything. I was only interested in moving on. That night, I sat outside my parents' house with a cup of tea watching the stars. I expected to feel something. Sadness. Regret. Maybe even guilt. But the truth? I felt nothing but relief. Because for the first time in a long time, I had made the right choice. By the next morning, the entire story had spread like wildfire. People who weren't even at the wedding were talking about it. Social media posts? Private messages. Everyone had an opinion on what had happened. Some people sided with me, saying I had dodged a bullet. Others, especially his family, called me selfish, immature, and dramatic. But the best part? The story had started twisting against him. Because when people asked why I left, all he could say was, "She just overreacted." But that wasn't enough. People wanted details. Eventually, they found them. His groomsmen started talking. His friends. People who had heard him complain for months about how he felt trapped, how he never wanted this wedding, how he was only doing it for his parents. Someone even leaked a recording of him ranting about it at his bachelor party. And just like that, his perfect image crumbled. Because now everyone knew. He wasn't a heartbroken man who had been left at the altar. He was just a coward who got exposed before he could run first. Meanwhile, his mother wouldn't stop. She called my family, trying to make me see reason. She messaged my friends, saying I had ruined her son's life. She even tried contacting my workplace, as if she could get me fired for canceling a wedding. But the more she pushed, the worse she made things for herself. Because now, people were starting to see where her son had learned his behavior. A few days later, I got a message from his father. It was short. "I underestimated you." I stared at the screen for a long time. I don't know what he meant by that. Maybe he thought I'd stay quiet. Maybe he thought I'd accept a life of being unwanted. But he was wrong, because I had chosen myself. And for once, I had no regrets. As for my ex, he went into damage control mode. Tried rewriting the story. Tried acting like it was all a misunderstanding. That I had misinterpreted what he said. That I had thrown everything away over nothing. But no one bought it. His own words had buried him. And now, he had to live with it. I never responded to his messages. Never answered his calls. I had spent too long believing his words meant something. And now, they meant nothing. Because this wasn't my loss. It was his. I expected things to die down after a few weeks. But instead, the mess just kept growing. The more my ex tried to control the story, the more it slipped through his fingers. Because no matter what he said, the facts didn't change. He didn't love me. He never wanted the wedding. He had been willing to go through with it only because of money and family pressure. And now that the truth was out, people weren't exactly lining up to defend him. A month after the disaster, a mutual friend reached out. He's still trying to explain himself to anyone who will listen. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. But then I remembered the conversation I had overheard. The way he had spoken about me like I was some obligation he had been forced into. And I remembered something even more important. I wasn't the one scrambling for damage control. I wasn't the one whose reputation had crashed and burned. I had walked away with my dignity intact. He was the one left in the ruins. His family, they weren't handling it well either. His mother had turned her embarrassment into rage. She was telling anyone who would listen that I was unstable, that I had always been too sensitive, that I had overreacted and thrown away a perfectly good man. But the problem? Nobody cared, because at the end of the day, their son had been exposed. And the more they blamed me, the worse they looked. I never responded to them, never engaged. I had wasted too many years of my life trying to fit into a world that had never truly welcomed me. Now, I had better things to focus on. Took time, but I started rebuilding my life. I got my place. I refocused on my career. And most importantly, I started living for myself. Not for him. Not for his family. Not for some expectation of what my life was supposed to look like. For me. And it felt incredible. Then, one day, months later, I got a final message from him. It was short. "I messed up. I miss you." I read it. I let myself sit with it for a moment. Then, I deleted it. Because I didn't miss him. I didn't miss the version of me that needed his approval. I didn't miss the life I had barely survived in. Months passed. Seasons changed. And with each passing day, the weight on my shoulders grew lighter. The life I had nearly trapped myself in, a distant memory. I had walked away from a future that wasn't mine. And I had never felt stronger. People still talked about the wedding disaster for a while. His family, of course, tried to rewrite history. Tried to paint me as the reckless, impulsive woman who had no idea what she wanted. But the problem with lies? They fall apart under pressure. Because the truth was already out there. Everyone had heard his own words. Had seen how he handled things. No matter what story they tried to spin, it always came back to one fact. He was the one who ruined everything. Not me. He didn't reach out again after that last message. Maybe he finally understood that there was no fixing this. Or maybe he just got tired of pretending to care. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. I had moved on. I stopped checking up on him. Stopped caring what people were saying. I had wasted too much of my life trying to convince myself I was happy. Now, I didn't have to pretend anymore. I had a fresh start. A new place. A future that was mine to create on my terms. And every day I woke up knowing I had made the right choice. One evening I found my old wedding dress tucked away in a closet. For a brief moment I considered what to do with it. Sell it? Donate it? Should burn it in some dramatic, symbolic gesture? Instead, I simply took it outside, stuffed it into a donation bin, and walked away. No second thoughts. No regrets. Because this wasn't a lost story. It was a story about freedom. And the best part? I never looked back. Hope you enjoyed this story as much as I do. Help this small channel grow by hitting that like button, subscribing, and sharing with your friends. Every bit of support means the world. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.